since we are our own users and we have tons of similar kind of users as customers, and we have Slack channels with all of them, we have a fairly deep understanding of the product, the problems. And I think that is the only way, like customer empathy, and then focusing on the actual user persona, like not building it for everyone, because that is just the sure way of you spreading you just way too thin, and then you will just end up building nothing for anyone. But yeah, focus, knowing your customer, being very, very close to them.
Our guest is Santtu Koivumäki, co-founder of Xero. Before Xero, Santtu and his co-founder helped scale Smartly.io past 100 million in ARR, so he has run go-to-market at serious scale the traditional way. Here's why we wanted Santtu on right now. Xero is going after the most entrenched category in B2B software, the CRM, with a simple and slightly crazy idea, zero-click. The agents do the work, and you step in only when you have to. We want to unpack what that actually looks like in production and where you quietly have to put the human back. Welcome, Santtu.
Thank you. That was very generous, but I'll take it.
Let's start with origin story. When was the aha moment that told you this changes everything? You'd already built GTM at scale the old way at Smartly. So what made you think the whole thing could be rebuilt?
There was not necessarily like one aha moment for us. Like we at Smartly, we left before the release of ChatGPT in November 2022, if I remember correctly.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So we had already left, but the problem that we wanted to fix already existed. So that the problem that we experienced at Smartly and similar kind of companies was just complexity. Like we went like if we speak about the CRM / let's say the go-to-market tech journey that we had at Smartly, we started with a simple Trello board, then we moved to Pipedrive, then we moved to HubSpot, and then eventually to Salesforce, and not only Salesforce, but the entire ecosystem. And pretty much like with a new sales leader, we implemented something new. So we had eventually a lot of complexity in the entire stack. So we had a fairly large organization. We have like when we left in 2022, we were 900 something people. So it was a big team already. And we had, of course, Salesforce. We had for customer success, we actually implemented another customer success platform tool separately because Salesforce just was horrible to use. And then we needed to have something that is specifically for customer success. Then the services side had something else. The sales side had something else. We used, call recorders and outreach tools, and we had Clary for forecasting. So there were like 10, probably 15 or more different tools, and all of the teams were in their own silo, their own tools. And then we had to have a fairly big team in managing all of that. And it was just, something that made Smartly originally successful was the speed to react and, do things. And that felt like where we ended up with Smartly and the go-to-market stack especially was fairly like rigid, like fairly complex, and just didn't allow too much of anything else than designing a process and then executing that process. So it wasn't fast, nimble, agile, but it was almost the opposite of that. And then we, some of the people probably felt like this is exactly how it should be and didn't see a problem. That's just how it goes. But with Tuomo, we felt like it was just, there must be a better way. We probably back then when we were there, we didn't know. We had no idea that we would one day start building a CRM ourselves, or we didn't foresee that there's going to be this AI era, this revolution coming at us in a couple of years. And but yeah, that probably planted the seed. And of course, I probably have to say that like Smartly is in no way unique. It's a very typical path for like pretty much any kind of a company doing, especially like B2B sales, B2B SaaS. This kind of a path we see still evolving, that companies just evolve into these kind of performance engines, and they have certain kind of a tech stack that is not necessarily optimized anymore for the modern world. But yeah, after we left from Smartly around the same time with Tuomo, we went back to building startups, like smaller startups, and we felt like we were excited first of all that now we don't have to use Salesforce anymore.
Yeah,
that was amazing.
Yeah. Main motivation not to use Salesforce.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like if you find me like a happy Salesforce customer or a Salesforce end user, then I'll I don't know what I would give you for that. But
people probably end up with like they have complexity, so they end up having this complex solution as well.
Yeah, I think it's just quite like there's a strong brand that somebody like Salesforce still has, and probably the different functions have similar kind of their Salesforces. There's probably like NetSuites and Workdays and so on. But in the world of CRMs and go-to-market sales, customer success, it's still Salesforce. But yeah, we were happy not to use Salesforce anymore, and excited that now we can use something else to actually build like sales functions, go-to-market. But we didn't find anything. Like there was only one tool, not going to name them, but like the modern like version, like the linear for CRMs that we separately trialed with Tuomo, and we're excited about that. But the whole experience was just underwhelming, and this was the best that the market could offer, and we just didn't understand it really. Like if this is the best, then maybe we should build something that we actually want to use ourselves.
Yeah, but
something that is like actually AI native.
Yeah, but you didn't start with like we want to build a CRM, but you just sort of went to sort of like around the problem of this whole GTM complexity, and the CRM was the sort of like outcome that you ended up building, or
probably like Xero was founded like, or maybe the decision to start building Xero was maybe a little bit over a year, like 13 months after the initial release of ChatGPT. And of course, it was easy to see that this is, the AI is not going to be only a chatbot that can write like funny jokes for you.
Yeah, agents weren't a big thing back then.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Probably nobody was talking about agents back then.
Yeah.
Came, I don't know, maybe last year or something. But it was easy to see that this is going to change everything. And then we wanted to be part of it. Like we wanted to be building something in the AI era. We didn't exactly know necessarily what, but that evolved then into CRM. That hey, there was this pain, and this is like a real problem. It's a big problem. It's a hairy, complex, very very difficult problem. It's the oldest SaaS category in the world. So there's before you can call yourself a CRM, there's a lot of stuff that you need to build first. And then on top of that, you need to build something more. It's you need to be a little bit crazy to embark on that kind of a journey. But for some reason, we were crazy enough to do that. Like we inherit all the expectations from the legacy CRMs, but we inherit none of the functionality, none of the code. So we need to build everything ourselves, which is of course much easier nowadays, especially when you start from scratch. You don't have any legacy, but you can start from scratch, and you have of course AI helping you build stuff, and that's easier than ever before.
Those legacy CRMs, HubSpot, Salesforce, they are also building a lot of AI features on top of them current CRM. So Xero is agent native from day one. What did building agent first let you do that you could never have done by adding AI to an existing CRM?
There's probably like a tons of small things, like smaller decisions that you do. Like when you design it, like AI native agent first from the beginning, instead of like building years or decades a system, and then you think, okay, where can I inject AI? Like how can we add something AI here? That we need to have AI as just to check the box. So you need to fairly, not necessarily radically rethink it, but you need to almost think that the agents that live inside the CRM or whatever system you're building are almost as users, like they are almost as employees. That can be a little bit dangerous way of thinking about it as well, because they are at the same time, like agents can be very like smart, like they are very, very intelligent. They can do many things like quickly, tirelessly, around the clock. So they're not humans in that sense. They need clear instructions, clear guardrails, harnesses, like what permissions, what can they do, what can't they do. But probably the easier analogy is to think about them as almost like employees, as junior, a little bit stupid, but very, very capable employees that need clear guardrails. And they need, of course, their needs are completely different than humans. Like humans need a UI. They need, like nowadays, natural language UI, especially. And then the agents, they need something else. That like their service is a little bit different. They need data. They need context. They need tools. They need read and or write tools. They need those guardrails so that they won't go rogue and do something stupid. So yeah, they don't need a UI, but they need like a different
API,
kind of a service.
Basically.
API, very capable API that you can do hopefully anything that you can do as a human being clicking in the product. And this has been something that we decided like very, very early on, that we invest in the API. Like before we actually like release the API to our customers, we had the API built like using the front end so that it wasn't very difficult for us to actually like release the API because it existed already there. And now with the API or the MCP, you can pretty much do almost all the things that a human can do in the AI in the UI.
I think that's sort of like a telltale sign of AI native companies that they build API first. So we've gone down the same road with our internal like research and development. So if we build any AI native tooling or anything else, it's usually API for agents and UI for people. So you could call it an agentic interface, but that's AI, so it's a bit confusing. So maybe API is a better term for that. But
and I think that's like the safest bet for more traditional SaaS companies now to make their API more.
I think it's a recurring theme as well that if you have an existing company that is basically entering this agentic era, that's the first thing you sort of need to fix. You need to make your APIs sort of agent compatible and think about if the agent makes call to your service using the API, what it gets in return. So like the amount of data and the shape of the data and everything. Yeah. So I think that's one of the core things that
it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen when. Well, we're thinking about the Salesforce and HubSpots of the world quite a lot, and they have, if you look at Salesforce and HubSpot's share price, for example, in the past 18 months, if my memory serves correct, Salesforce is down I think 45%, and HubSpot even more, I think over 70%. So the market is like, they don't necessarily have too much trust in them anymore. Of course, they are still growing and they are, onboarding customers and they are expanding, but they are also quite likely to continue reducing their API, like their data. They don't want to probably let companies like us or anybody else like building on top of them, at least for free. So I would imagine that they're going to make the API access more painful for companies to build, especially build on like a new business that is attacking them. That's what we've seen, for example, with the Slack API. They've made, like Salesforce has made some big restrictions over there, and it'll be interesting to see where this is going to head to, and what the AI native companies can do in return. Like how can you start? Like is computer using agent going to be the answer to that you don't go through the API anymore, but you actually use the UI as an agent, or will you start actually generating like data yourself, like insights yourself? Like if in the case of CRMs, for example, like will you start generating data that you don't have access to anymore from emails, from sales pipeline movements, and then start generating something that you don't necessarily have access to from different methods and different ways.
Yeah, interesting. I was just thinking that I think the other day that the seat-based pricing that the Slack and everything similar companies are having, I think that's the sort of troublesome thing that is leading to these like restricted APIs and everything else, because if you have one agent, it consumes so much of the API concept, like compared to like one human using an API. So the volumes are so much different, and I think this is still sort of forming that how do you price these services if you have like one agent seat that is consuming a lot of your API data.
Yeah. And there can be very stupid agents that are like over consuming.
Yes.
And, if there are no restrictions, no rate limits, you can just anyone can configure some kind of an agent or some kind of like a workflow that just pulls tons of data and consumes a lot of like resources on the API side.
Yeah. How are you approaching this? Is this probably something that is on your table?
Yeah, it's not a huge problem for us at the moment, but we have seen sometimes something in our monitoring goes off, and then we see like what's happening here, and then we notice somebody has created some customer is calling the API and then causing a lot of calls there. So yeah, we are monitoring the situation and the usage, but we are definitely seeing the impact already a little bit today. But yeah, we'll probably implement some kind of like some generous rate limits there that you can't just you shouldn't do anything you can with the API. You can you have to be a little bit smart about it. So we need to probably educate the users, educate the agents as well.
It's probably Tapsa's agents before any event.
Yeah, probably might be. Yeah, 1-0 user here. Okay. How do you build trust between a user and an agent that's reaching out to their actual prospects, like human in the loop? Like, it's bad if bad email goes to real buyer. Have you found some good ways to solve this problem?
Maybe if I would start building an agent in Zero, I probably first of all wouldn't start from like an outreach agent. Like there's tons of these kind of AI SDR tools nowadays that you can they promise a lot, and just tell us what you want the agent to do and who's your target buyer, and then we'll spam them a lot of emails, and that's just probably not going to work. Like it's going to just it's going to ruin the performance of any kind of outbound sales for everyone, not only for yourself. So it's not to say that we don't do it, but I probably wouldn't just recommend anyone to start with that, because the impact radius of something going wrong can be bad. Some people, of course, like some companies, they have tolerance for that. Like if you're in like volume sales, if you're selling to like a ton of like smaller deals to a lot of like smaller companies, then you probably just have to have the volume, and then you're fine if you burn a lead by sending them like a bad message or sending them something that is just irrelevant, or it says hi first name, or something similar. Yeah. But you don't if you're in enterprise sales and then your deal values are high, then you probably don't want to do that. So I would sequence building any kind of an agent with that kind of like a impact radius. Like if it's internal, it's probably, and if it's reversible, then it's fine. You can just let the agent do it. And if it's external, then I would test it very carefully and make sure, like almost as you were training like a junior employee, that if you hire like a sales trainee, you probably want to review yourself like the first 50 emails that they are going to send out. Similarly, I would do that, and I have done that with my agents. So just going through, okay, is this something that I would send out myself? If not, going back to the agent, giving it different instructions, giving different context, highlight this, deprioritize that, try it again until it's good. And then if all looks good, then you're fine with that kind of, if something goes wrong, then you just let it roam free.
Yeah.
But everybody has to figure out, I guess, their own tolerance for those kind of errors. Nobody probably wants to be that guy who blasts like irrelevant, clearly AI written slop messages. But if you pay a little bit more attention and you actually perfected it, I think it's actually not that difficult of a job to like replicate your tone of voice, be relevant, and like have AI write messages on your behalf. But it does require a little bit it requires the right kind of tools, and you need to know a little bit what you're doing.
Yeah, agreed. What about outside of that use case? Do you see like what are some super interesting like agent use cases inside Xero that you can talk about? Like what have you seen or what have you been thinking about?
I think maybe the first thing that always comes to my mind is something that happens after a call, not a phone call, but a video call that is usually nowadays, at least in our bubble, is recorded with some kind of an AI note taker. So you have like a demo call, sales call, customer call, onboarding call, negotiation call, whatever call you have, and then you have those deals, those opportunities in your pipeline, and you get, or the system, Xero in this case, gets the call transcripts. So we know that, okay, this person spoke to that person. We get the call transcript. We know that there's a deal actually associated with this company and this meeting that just took place. And there's a ton of information there. Like the call transcripts are very rich in their context. And then when you combine that with the context that we have in the CRM, that we know, okay, this is a deal in the demo stage or trial pilot stage, that is another piece of context. And then you can take that context and, for example, move the deal in the pipeline automatically, populate certain fields automatically. If something was wrong in the call, or there are certain kind of action points as a result of the call, and you want to maybe flag it, send a Slack notification, or highlight this deal as a risk, or something that is likely going to be closed. And then this is why it's interesting, is because there's just such a high volume of these kind of interactions between somebody who's doing sales and using a CRM and the prospects. And traditionally that's been just completely manual. That you as a salesperson, you've had some kind of a way of capturing that. Before the AI note takers, you would have your own Apple Notes or your Notion or Google Docs or something else, and then you know that every Monday morning I need to reserve 2 hours to move this, copy paste this information into my CRM, so keep my pipeline up to date, and then that's just like an example of the things that nobody should do anymore.
Yeah, I agree.
I think personally, because we are quite event driven, so we got a lot of events, and I from event apps usually scrape a lot of event attendees straight to Xero. And I have my, let's call it agent, like ICP agent, categorizing the company and the person. Is it our ICP, and it works really well. So if you put like a few hundred people, you usually get like 50 or something like that. So it saves a lot of time.
Yeah, the CRM should already know like who you are, who you're selling to, what you're selling to them. And then, ideally it would already know if this company is a good match for you or not. If this person that you've talked to and associated with this deal, if they represent that kind of a person that you should be talking to, or is there likely somebody else that you should be talking to in the same organization? That, for example, is the decision maker, the budget holder, or technical owner, or somebody else that ideally the CRM would understand it already beforehand, and maybe even flag it to you that, hey, you seem to be missing this kind of a person in your deal, that you haven't talked to them at all, and this might be the right person for you to talk to before advancing this deal. You want to maximize your chances as a salesperson to close as many deals with as high percentage as possible and make your VP of sales happy.
Yeah. Have there been any surprises you have hit in production while building this AI native agents?
Well, we are a fairly early stage startup, and we are building and shipping fast every day and every week with our like early customers that we probably call our beta users or our design partners, especially a little bit earlier. So of course, like stuff happens.
Any learnings you want to share that might benefit other founders?
I don't know if I think we're in a fortunate situation with what we are building is like we are customers ourselves. Like we are initially we started building Xero because we wanted to build something that we would actually want to use ourselves for ourselves and people and companies similar to us. So that gives us a little bit like some kind of an unfair advantage that we can dog food the product ourselves before we release it to anybody else. So we are our own customer. So we are shipping the features first for ourselves. We are using them ourselves. And then when we are happy, we sort of do that kind of an internal QA ourselves. And then we ship it to like a limited set of maybe friendly customers. And they know, like we've been with them for potentially like a long time, maybe from the beginning, so that they know, okay, this is like a new feature, and they know that they will test it and they will flag if there's anything surprising, if there are any issues, or if the design should be different, or it's not exactly serving their use case, and then only after that we'll then share it with everybody else. But of course, like stuff happens. Nothing crazy or like serious comes to my mind. Only one thing, actually. This was fairly recently. There was one customer who had like a completely new customer, a new user. So they didn't know Xero that well yet. And maybe the main learning was for us that maybe our agent was a little bit too flexible, or the actual agent builder wasn't intuitive enough that could have prevented this kind of a small configuration issue that caused all the deals, all the opportunities of this customer to move to a one stage and associate it with one company. So there was a little glitch there. Nothing crazy happened. They flagged it. They told us actually in Slack, where we have all of our customers anyways. And we then reverted that. We just roll it back, and then we implemented some changes in the way that what the agent can and can't do.
Yeah, nice.
But no serious incidents, luckily.
Now when it's like quite fast to build new features, and I would imagine CRM is this sort of like a rabbit hole with a lot of different tunnels that you can go in a lot of ways, and you can get excited about different sort of features. Is dog fooding one of the ways that you sort of keep the focus on what you're building so you can easily test something? And how do you sort of like select, and how do you keep your head in this sort of, do you have a North Star that you're sort of looking at, like deciding what you implement? And
I think it is a rabbit hole, and then you can very easily, when you're building something so wide and so ambitious, you can easily spread yourself like very, very thin, and then build like half-baked solutions that don't really work together. So that our learning is that just like clearly focus on your ICP and the actual user persona. Don't have too many of them. So build it for one person, ideally one kind of a company that then represents your entire ideal customer profile, and then focus on building it for them. And then in our case, luckily we've been doing sales before. We've been, as I mentioned, we've used CRMs and different kind of sales tools. So we have some kind of a taste ourselves. And taste is probably very, very important in now when building is so much faster. So it's if you can theoretically you can just build a lot more. Even more people now can build more. They can ship code. They can create PRs. That's when I think that some kind of like a clear product vision, like who are you building it to, what are exactly the use cases that you want to fix, and then the taste in the product, that you actually pay a lot of attention on how the product actually feels, how for the actual end user, and of course for the agents as well. That creates the entire like full user experience. That's very important. And probably that kind of a trap that many companies now step into, that okay, now they're excited that now everybody can ship, the entire team can build and fix things, but that just ends up easily building complexity. Somebody makes a decision, like somebody makes one decision somewhere in the product, how the product works, and then especially if you're talking about startups or other companies that are just growing and scaling, then it's very likely that you will just end up living with that decision and then create the next decision based on that, and then the next decision based on that. So you'll create like layers and layers of complexity without really having the time to go and focus on fixing the initial issue that you built. And then you end up in a situation where you have to either just refactor the entire thing, or then start educating users on how to use that, or educating agents on how to use that, when you've created this web of complexity by not having that kind of a taste, not having the clear idea who you're building it to, not having the guardrails of who can make what kind of decisions.
Yeah, I think it's sort of it's a trap that you get this like user requests about features. So it's really easy to just see the ticket and okay, I will just wipe code that, test it, and then push it to production. So it's really easy to sort of like close tickets and just ship stuff. But that's how complexity happens.
Yeah,
especially if you're not using the product yourself, sort of like you're not solving your own problem.
Yeah,
then
you
it's
don't
maybe difficult
know. You don't have that kind of an understanding of how should this, like it's much easier that to sort of outsource the product thing to the customer. That somebody says, I want to delight this customer. They flagged an issue and I want to delight them, and I want to fix it for them. And you can maybe even prompt in Slack. You can now prompt Linear or Claude or Cursor to fix this, or create a PR, or maybe not even a PR. So it's very possible today, but also probably many companies also lack that kind of like an AI agentic coding like infrastructure that would allow them to actually do that well, because the AI coding agents they tend to be without clear instructions and clear different kind of like markdown files that would tell, or clear prompting that would tell them like exactly what you need to think about before you start implementing something. They just sort of want to please you. Okay, I'll fix this.
Yeah.
And then they create, instead of reusing some existing component that exists in the code base already, that is doing the same thing elsewhere, they're just going to create a new one, or create a new like UI component.
Yeah.
Or it's easily like lacking that kind of a overall design and taste and how the product should actually work for the end user and or the agent.
Yeah, my sort of consensus so far coding with agents for a long time now is that they are really good at extending and expanding things, but they are really bad at sort of minimizing and sort of streamlining solutions, sort of like doing less, because those language models more or less, they just keep adding stuff.
Yeah.
Like you described. So when you are asking for features, they usually don't sort of go over your product and think about, hey, how can we solve this in a sort of elegant way? Can we, combine some features and make this like a one step easier? But they usually just keep adding stuff. And if you don't have anybody sort of guiding those models, then you end up with then you have a complex software after that. And
yeah, I recognize that either requires like an actual an engineer to understand the code base enough for them to prompt and plan before implementing anything, instead of just like blindly one-shotting some kind of like a new feature that is it's likely going to go wrong, or then it requires some kind of an infrastructure that will then point the coding agent to the right direction. Okay, before implementing anything like this, make sure that you go and check if there's something similar existing, and if we can reuse something existing, let's not create anything new. But that is probably not something that many companies and teams have implemented.
If we segue this into the zero-click philosophy, how are you sort of like, how do you see, how do we get to that with a CRM? Like, how do we get to this? How can we fulfill your vision with your product to have like what would be the elements that will end up as a zero-click CRM?
Well, maybe a couple of things first good to mention is that like zero-click is something that we decided to name the company Zero. There's maybe a quick story I can share.
Yeah.
This is probably going to be lame, but I'll share it anyways.
No, it's going to be great.
It's when we started Zero, we didn't call it Zero. We didn't have a name. We just wanted to build this kind of a product, and we also wanted to. We knew that we wanted to build it for like tech startups initially, because they are the fast adopting. They are fast moving. They will love something like this. They appreciate like new technologies, something else than the other extreme, which is the legacy tools. They don't want to use those. There's a new generation of those kind of companies. And then we knew that we are not necessarily going to find them anywhere like close, or it would be easy to find those kind of companies close by. So we pretty much immediately, we booked flights to San Francisco and New York, and then we just went there without any existing networks really. We just started like cold DMing people that we found from LinkedIn and asked them if they want to have a coffee, that we're building something like this. And we were on that first San Francisco trip, and we decided that before we leave here, like in a 5 days or something, we are going to come up with a name. Like we have to figure out a name. And I remember that we were having lunch, and then we were just like trying to spot things from the menu, or somewhere else from the surrounding, seagull or bridge or oyster or something else, and nothing really stuck. And then we just we went to a meeting, and we met with a Silicon Valley AI startup founder in a cafe nearby, and I had just DM'd him that, hey, we're building something like this. We wanted to get your thoughts and just grab a coffee and just get to know you and get your feedback on if this makes sense or not. And then he started then saying that, okay, guys, if I were you, I would be building a zero-click CRM. And then I took notes, and after the meeting, I told Tuomo that I think it's this one. That this is what he described is exactly what we've been talking about. And what if we condense our vision into one single word, that we don't have to keep reminding ourselves or the team that we will maybe one day have, that, what is our guiding principle? Then we are there to reduce clicks, because clicks are so evident and so present in the legacy tools that we are now competing with. That you, for a simple thing that you want to do, you need to click several times. You need to find, open the right tab first and go, find the right record, find the right tab and click on the button. And that's exactly what we want to avoid. We want everything to happen as automatically as possible. So that's when we decided on the name. That's the vision. We don't necessarily claim that we're there yet with zero clicks. But also, I think zero clicks doesn't mean zero visibility. It's less clicks and more bringing your data and your insights and your command center of your go-to-market to wherever you are, in the product, in the UI, through the chat interface, the natural language interface, through a Slack bot or Claude, MCP, whatever it's going to be. We don't care where the user is actually, that we want to bring the product and the insights and on you to command it with natural language wherever you are, instead of forcing you to go into the product or thinking that it's some kind of a black box that just runs there on its own and you have no control over it. I completely lost what was your initial question.
The story was good.
Yeah, the story was good. You undersold it. It was really good. And my question was that how do we get to this, closer to this vision that is your name? What sort of things do you see need to happen before you can have this zero-click CRM? Even though... And
while you're thinking, we are a little bit in the same mission from interfaces to Intentfaces.
Yes, we are not there yet, but the same idea behind the name is that instead of clicking around buttons and opening drop-downs, you state your intent and the computer does it for you. So that's the interfaces to Intentfaces philosophy.
Yeah. Okay, that makes perfect sense. I hadn't thought about that, but excellent. We're on the same boat.
Yes.
Almost on the same sofa as well. How to get there? I think there's a couple of things. I could go back to the taste, and I guess with taste, I think the main thing that will get anybody there is deep customer empathy, really truly understanding what the customer needs and wants, and that's why it's also fun to be building zero for ourselves. Unlike if I think about Smartly, for example, that was I was, for example, never I didn't have that kind of customer empathy for the Smartly users, because they were the big companies like Spotify, Uber, Airbnb, Zalando, and their marketing teams. I have never done that kind of paid social digital marketing myself, never been in that kind of big corporation on the B2C side. So I had no idea. We try to be as close as possible with them and try to know them as much as possible. And when building a product for that kind of a user persona, you need to then validate, okay, does this make sense? Does that make sense? But now we can actually, since we are our own users and we have tons of similar kind of users as customers, and we have Slack channels with all of them, we have a fairly deep understanding of the product, the problems. And I think that is the only way, customer empathy and then focusing on the actual user persona, not building it for everyone, because that is just a sure way of you spreading you just way too thin, and then you will just end up building nothing for anyone. But yeah, focus, knowing your customer, being very, very close to them.
Yeah. One business question and then few last questions. You mentioned not building for everyone. Do you, and you talk about your ICP, do you see you're against HubSpot and Salesforce? And do you see like, is this agentic or being AI native real wedge, or will they out-deliver you in 18 months?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we are in a quite different category with them. They are public companies. We are a startup that existed for 2 years. They are, I think, I don't even know, combined turnover somewhere around like 50 billion or something. So we're not there yet. So they have a huge, massive distribution advantage. And but also like AI has existed for a while already. And then there's no way that we could call these two companies as AI native companies. That they are clearly like the previous generation, like the legacy tools. And it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen. And I would imagine that they will continue growing. Let's see what's going to happen with their share price. Like, will it continue declining? That doesn't look too great. It's like a slope that you could ski down. But the market doesn't seem to believe in them, and I'm sure that they will be trying to build more and more AI features themselves, and or doing something similar than what Salesforce did not that long time ago, which was marketing launch, calling them headless, which is basically an API. So they probably are trying their best to figure it out, and I'm not going to say that we are like they have no idea who we are. Of course, we are like our main customer is coming from HubSpot. That's the best match for us because HubSpot is so incompatible with the newer generation of like companies. Like we are working with like growth companies, startups that are growing, and they are not very old, and we see that there's a new generation of companies and people who are making decisions also on their tech stack, like how are they going to build their business. And similarly then, these kind of growing companies, startups and scale-ups, they're not going to choose anymore like Workday to run their HR or NetSuite to run their finance and ERP. They will select like more modern solutions. They are. My bet is that they're also not going to select in the future these kind of legacy tools to build their go-to-market on, because I think that the AI native solutions, they are going to outperform the legacy solutions. They're just going to be better. They're going to just deliver better results. And also like the moat with these legacy tools have been always in the switching costs and in the data and the logging the data. They many of them considers changing a CRM to be like an open heart surgery, and nobody wants to do that. They know that it's going to be way too complex, that it will require a project for a year with 50 consultants, and it's so expensive and not going to bring us the results that we want. So everybody's avoiding that kind of a topic. They know that the Salesforce is the end destination. You never leave from Salesforce. But I think the other thing that we're betting on, in addition to there being like a newer generation of go-to-market leaders who are not going to be choosing these legacy tools anymore, that there's also the switching cost mode is going to be removed by agents that can go into your existing CRM, assuming that they keep the APIs open, can read your data, your permissions, your configuration, and then replicate that in the newer solution that outperforms the old solution.
Yep. And migrate the data, like...
Yeah. The data migration is the easy part.
Yeah.
There's of course, the higher you go, like the bigger company you go, and the more there is just legacy, just data integrations and people, the more complex it is. But I don't see, like, this is what we're seeing in the AI ERP space already, that this is already happening, and I don't see how that would not happen in the CRM space. The data migration is the easy part. The configuration, like replicating the workflows, like turning some existing workflows into new workflows or agents to do that work for you. That's going to be the difficult part. But that's exactly what we believe in, and I don't see anything else happening.
Yeah.
Couple last personal questions. So where do you personally use agents right now outside of Xero?
At the moment, I probably have two. So I jumped in the spring. I jumped on board to OpenClaw. So I have an old laptop at home, and OpenClaw is running there. I think I have 5 different agents there doing nothing very complex, but basically they are, it's a way for me to also, I want to be in the forefront of, all things AI, so that I can understand how we can build those things into Xero as well. So that's why I, for example, have OpenClaw that is doing meeting preps for me. It's managing my pipeline, flagging conversations that I may have missed or follow-ups that I should be sending. And then by the time that this comes out, this is all going to be completely outdated already. But yeah, this is the kind of stuff that I started building myself. So I have my personal assistant there living in my old laptop, and I'm using Telegram bots to then keep me up to date on what should I be doing. And then of course I love these coding agents, Claude Code, Codex. Codex is my go-to tool for building anything. And then what I actually built myself earlier this year was it probably doesn't qualify as an agent, but I built an iOS app, like a native Swift iOS app for myself. That is my personal workout coach, my gym coach. So it lives inside my pocket, and it reminds me when I miss a workout. I can just ask it. The first tab there is the coach app. Coach tab, and I just ask it to plan my next workout for tomorrow. I want to go to the gym tomorrow, and then it creates based on my previous, first of all, my goals and my previous workouts. It plans the entire workout for me, the reps and the weights and everything else, and all I need to do is just show up. And I've given it also a tone that roasts me. So especially when I miss a workout or I skip, some kind of a exercise at the gym, then I've given it a tone that then makes me feel bad about that. So it's like a grumpy old coach that I call Sali Markku.
Nice.
Okay, so last question: what inspires you in AI right now, and what are you watching? And maybe who's building something you quietly admire?
I wish that I had a unique and interesting answer to this one. But of course, everybody is watching very closely the likes of Anthropic and OpenAI, maybe even Google. The foundational models is of course something that you want to be very, very close to. But then I assume that you've asked this question already beforehand in this podcast. Yep. And I would be surprised if somebody hasn't mentioned Andrej Karpathy. Have they?
I don't think so.
No. Amazing. Then it's a unique answer.
Yeah.
Karpathy fairly recently joined Anthropic.
Yep.
Yeah. His YouTube channel is gold. He has this long form, 2-hour videos of him explaining LLMs inside out, or how he uses LLMs himself. So he is a great educator in AI. I'm a big fan of him. And maybe like a wild card answer that I can give is our angel investor James Hawkins from PostHawk. He talks about AI and all things work life a little bit differently with different kind of a tone. So if you don't know him, go and follow him on socials. LinkedIn and X are probably the ones. Yeah, James Hawkins is my hero.
Okay, nice. And where people can follow you, Santtu?
LinkedIn is the only social media that I'm active. So I'm there, sometimes sharing some spicy takes and nonsense.
And before I say thanks, I say to our listeners or watchers, Spotify for Creators yesterday reminded me that we should always say that, hey, please follow us or subscribe us whenever you listen or watch us. So please subscribe.
Yeah, like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe, yeah. Thank you, Santtu.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.